Welcome to Transparency in Government. Before I introduce my guests, I want to take a moment to thank Dottie Grover for beginning this show and giving our town leaders a forum to discuss what is happening beyond the town in school meetings. It would have been a disservice to her if the cable studio didn't continue the show, and I'm privileged to have been asked to step in. I hope this continues to be as she envisioned it. Today I have with me our town manager, Kevin Smith. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Mary, and thank you to you for continuing on this program. I know it was very important to Dottie to have this frank discussion about town government and school government every month, and I think she'd be thrilled to know that it continues on after her.
Yeah. Well, and I love doing this type of show, so I'm glad
Great.
to have been asked. I appreciate being asked. So there have been a lot of news articles recently in a lot of different papers about the growth that's going on in our region, in the southern region, and it's everything that we're talking about at all of our meetings as well. I know that we have a couple of growth management workshops coming up, and so do you want to go ahead and talk about those things?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we'll start right with that with, I guess, the growth management, but also maybe we should back up and do a 30,000 foot level view of population growth in southern New Hampshire and in the entire region, even, northern Massachusetts as well. Londonderry, of course, for 2016, when the U.S. Census numbers came out, said it was the fastest growing community in the state, which is kind of, when you read that, it's kind of eye-popping. You go, wow, fastest growing community. Now, we grew by, the numbers were around 730, I think, which, when you think about that in comparison to other communities, Manchester, I think, grew by 400 and something. Nashua was down somewhere in the 200s. I think that says maybe less about Londonderry and more about the other communities in New Hampshire, that New Hampshire's population growth hasn't been stunning by any means compared to other places across the country. And what that means is, I think all of us who have children are hoping that our kids can find work in this area once they graduate school, whether they go to a technical college or a secondary or four-year college. Would like them to be able to hopefully work and live around here. But certainly if you're seeing population decreases, the jobs aren't going to be created in this area. So I view the population growth as a good thing because that's going to attract more employers to the area, which hopefully means more jobs in the future so that people don't have to do what folks like my father and thousands of other Granite Staters did or do every day, which is travel 45 minutes south, although it's really 2 hours south once you get into the traffic, and have to go into Boston or into the 128 corridor to find work. So
we've had two things that really have spurred this on, though, the widening of 93 and also opening up of Pentonville Road. Yeah. And between the businesses that are up there, and so there's more of a need for the housing that we're talking about, the starter homes or the housing that would people that were out of high school or
right. Yeah,
out of college could afford to live in.
Exactly, and that's what workforce housing is designed for those folks that are just starting out, and like you said, they maybe can't afford a single family home in this area. I mean, the whole idea of starter homes is almost non-existent anymore. You can't find starter homes in the $250,000 range. Homes today are going high twos, low threes, over $400,000. You look at the new single-family homes that are being built in this community, and they all start around $400,000.
Well, and they're all 3 or 4 bedroom houses too.
Right, and that's the other thing. You're not finding 2-bedroom starter homes anymore. So that really began the advent of the workforce housing. And there's been a lot of somewhat misinformation about workforce housing, that people will call it Section 8, they'll call it subsidized housing. All that workforce housing means is that you have to show that you have a means of income to be able to live there. So it's not folks who are receiving subsidies from the government.
Right.
Now, the development owners, they do receive a credit so that they can offer lower rents from the state. That being said, Londonderry, the reason why Londonderry's been attractive now for the last few years for workforce housing developments, we have Whittemore Estates, which is off of Mammoth Road near Mountain Home Estates on the other side.
Right.
You have the Wallace Farm apartments, which are up at Exit 5.
Yeah, and they're all beautiful developments.
They are. They're very well-made buildings. McGregor Cut, which is off of Stonehenge. The reason why Londonderry's been attractive is because and this should be of no surprise, but Londonderry, because it falls within Rockingham County, what the developers can then charge for rent for workforce housing is pretty high. In other areas, it would be typical market rate housing.
Right.
What you're going to pay in Manchester for market rate, you're paying that in workforce housing in Londonderry.
Right.
Rents are $1,400. So when you hear workforce housing, people think, oh, rents must be $500, $600, $700. Not even close to that. It's over double that.
Right.
And the market rates are $1,600, $1,700. And Londonderry is a great commuter location. So it's really kind of been falling in that bullseye of why that kind of housing has become attractive to developers here. But the other part of that is, and you mentioned this, developers wouldn't be building it if there wasn't the need. And the reality is there is a need, because you have a lot of millennials who either can't afford a home or don't want to buy a home right now, but are looking for a housing that they can afford, or they want to save, so they want to rent. And there isn't a lot of supply for that in southern New Hampshire right now. And Londonderry, by the way, isn't the only community that's seeing workforce housing developments. Bedford has seen it, Amherst has seen it. So there's a lot of other towns in this region that are seeing that kind of housing as well.
So what do we do, though, to protect the people that live here right now? Because we know, water is a big issue in our town, as far as the fact that not everybody is on sewer, and a lot of people have wells. And every time there's a new development, there's more impervious pavement, there's more,
Right.
There's less ability for the water to stay in the ground and be utilized, or there's more demand for it.
Yep.
So how do we protect? I know one of the things that I was reading is that the town council may consider purchasing some development land and then selling it, when they want to, or could we go back to the heyday of, buying development rights as we had done before? We had an open space program before you became, town manager,
Yep.
and Max Apples and a bunch of Sunnyfield, I think, or
Sunnycrest.
Sunnycrest.
Yeah, Merrill Farms
Right.
as well.
Right, are
Yeah.
all protected.
Right.
Well, we own the development rights on
Right.
there, so whether, they could be developed, but it would be developed under our guidance.
Yeah.
So, is that worth something that we should be doing at this point?
Oh, it's definitely worth looking at. And, and on the issue of water too, just so folks understand, it's, when you have large scale developments like this, they have to bring in municipal water. They're not individual wells that are being
Right.
put in. So, and we get all of our municipal water from Pennachuck, which largely comes from Nashua, and Manchester Waterworks as well, toward the Manchester end of town. But the purpose, so we have growth management workshops that are going to be coming up to talk about these very issues that you raise. October 5th is the first one. It's going to be an evening one, 7 to 9 o'clock.
So that's next Friday.
Thursday. Is the 5th Friday?
Is the 5th Friday?
Well, it's whatever next Thursday is, the first
Okay.
week in October,
All right.
whatever those dates are.
All right.
I thought it was the 5th, but that's That'll be a Thursday evening, the first
Okay.
week of October, 7 to 9. And then there'll be a follow-up one, I believe it's October 21st, which is a Saturday,
Okay.
from 8 to 10 in the morning. If we have to go longer, we'll go longer too.
Sure.
But the purpose is to discuss the different methods of growth management. You can employ growth management without having an actual growth management ordinance. Because in order to have the ordinance, there needs to be a study that's done, and so you got to pay for that study. And then they look at all different variables that go into whether or not a growth management ordinance needs to be enacted. And if you look at Londonderry's population growth, even though we were the fastest growing community in 2016, the growth itself still is nowhere near what the levels were in the 1980s and the 1990s.
Right.
We're not growing anywhere near that fast, which is a good thing. But nonetheless, so you can look at things like having an open space program, looking at, okay, what are the current developable parcels of land in the town right now that we could see getting developed sometime in the future that we want to purchase the development rights on today.
Right.
That's looking ahead. So there's different methods you can employ to get to where you want to go to try to limit growth in the town. And I think too, especially for residents that are new to town, and when I say new, I'm talking in the last 5 to 10 years, that maybe weren't aware of the open space program and aren't aware of how much open space we do have preserved in town. You know, one of the things I inevitably see all the time on a Facebook thread anytime Woodmont Commons is discussed is, well, now all the orchards are going to be gone. That's it. All the orchards. Well, no, they're not going to be
Right.
because we've protected them.
Right.
All of them, except for, I believe, Elwood, have easements on them right now. And Elwood is in an area where if it ever was going to be developed, you know, it would be AR1, it'd be residential and not commercial. But that's, you know, another area too you could look and say,
Right.
okay, should we engage in a conversation with the owners of Elwood Orchards to see if they would give up the development rights in the future? These are all things that are open for discussion, and we want to hear the community's thoughts and ideas about what they would like to see us do to manage growth over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, so where are those going to be held? Are they at Town Hall, or are they?
Yes, they'll both be at Town Hall in the Town Council chambers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And the first workshop is going to be more of an educational forum. Where were we? How did we get here? What are the different tools, some of what I just talked about, but in more depth, what are the different tools you can employ to have growth management so that everyone understands what all the options are that are on the table and everything you can't do legally as well. Because we are limited by state statute, we're limited by precedent that's been set by court cases. You know, developers have rights too. It's something we were talking about off air before
Right.
we went on is developers have a right to legally develop their land within the regulations and zoning of a community. So, you know, it's talking about all those things, and so that everyone will be educated so that when we go to the second workshop later on in the month, we can dive right into, okay, what are some of the things that we should be exploring as a town to manage growth. The other thing I just want to point out too is I think we've been proactive in going back to the workforce housing. After the third development came in, which was the McGregor Cut, we stepped back and said, okay, all of these developments are getting a lot of variances. What is it about our ordinance that is not working or that is too limited, too restrictive, that the ZBA is having to give these variances? And so we went back and we fixed our workforce housing ordinance so that it would be legally crafted in a way that would meet legal muster, but also so the developers won't feel they won't have to go to the ZBA to be getting variances. Rather, they will have to play within
Right, those rules.
the rules and regulations of the
Right.
ordinance. So while it may sound like, oh, they're not going to have to go get variances, now they can it's actually the way it was crafted makes it, I don't want to say more difficult for workforce housing, but it makes it so that it's not too legally restrictive, which I think is something that will help us manage not having so much workforce housing come into the town in the future, because of course what that does is it adds significantly to the school population as well. And again, those are things we want to manage. We're not opposed to workforce housing. We just want to make sure we're managing the growth in a manageable way.
The state dictates that you have to have a certain percentage.
Right.
So, and
well, and Mary, that's the funny thing too is
it's a very gray.
It is, because they don't
area.
say what percentage you need to have. They just say every community has to have its fair share of workforce housing.
Right.
Well, what is fair share?
Right. You know, typical state.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of stresses on our town, once these things do come in, the fire department and the police department are receiving many, many more calls as our population has grown in our town. And so what is that going to mean as far as the budget is concerned when we have, when we come forward? Are we going to be seeing an increase in our budget, do you think? Or do you think, certainly we probably will see the bond come back for the fire department.
For the communications.
Right,
Yeah.
well, communications, yeah.
Right.
But you don't think you're going to also want to try and get the central station redone?
No, I think that's definitely
the
going
back
to be, I wouldn't even say it's a back burner. I would say that that's going to be coming up in the very near future.
Okay.
There's two large infrastructure projects involving, well, one of them being the central fire station. Population growth or no population growth, a new central fire station is needed because as equipment grows and trucks grow, and we've added personnel, we've completely outgrown that station, which was built in the 1970s. And so that's something that we knew was coming up for a long time, and now is the time where we're saying, yeah, we need a new central fire station. So one of the things we're looking at right now is, can we build on the same location? Are there any cost savings by doing it in that location and kind of retrofitting the current one, adding on to it? That's what the feasibility study was for, that the voters passed last March. So that's one infrastructure project. The other one is the communications upgrade that involves both police and fire and DPW as well. I anticipate that'll be coming up as well this budget season. So those are two large infrastructure costs, and really they're both, I can't say they're both population driven, because even if our population remains stagnant at this point, we would still need both of those things. Police and fire need to be able to communicate over their radios. Technology is changing, and the old communication devices we have and equipment we have is becoming fastly outdated.
And it's not supported any longer either, is it?
After the year 2020, I believe.
Okay.
And so, again, that's more of a result of the change of technology, the reason we have to do that. And again, the fire station is just, we've outgrown what's currently there. But in terms of, the operating budget and staff, we have increased, you're right that calls have gone up, and that's not just due to workforce housing development, but it's actually more due to the assisted living development in town now on 102. There's also the new 55 plus apartments behind there as well. Less calls to there, but more to the assisted living. With the expansion of I-93 and that whole corridor being torn up right now, there have been a lot of accidents in that area that police and fire are responding to all the time. It seems like almost on a daily basis. And so, we added 4 fire personnel a couple of years ago. We've added 4 new policemen now in the last couple of years. What I have asked the departments at this point is to not come forward with any new personnel costs in the next fiscal year 19 budget, to hold off on it let's see how quick Woodmont starts to ramp up first, and then reevaluate this next year before we ask for any more personnel. The good news, Mary, that we've been able to, so has there been a strain on services? Yes. Have we been able to meet those strains? I believe we have. And even though we've been increasing our operating budget over the last few years, the tax rate on the town has been going down because we've been offsetting it with all of the new valuation from the development. And as long as we continue to do that, as long as we continue to not outpace our spending by what the valuation is going up, we'll be able to add the resources we need without, handing it to the taxpayers at the same time.
Keep it a stable rate or
and that's
slight
really,
increase.
I mean, when you can do that, man, that's a good place to
It
be.
is a good place to be.
Yeah.
When we look at our town debt right now, and compared to what this town could afford, legally afford to have, isn't it tremendously low?
I believe it. On the town side, it certainly is. I think on the school side, it probably is right now.
What bonds do you still have outstanding on the town side?
We have the police bond that's still outstanding, the library, and I believe there are some roadway bonds that are still outstanding, but are starting in 2019 start coming off the books. Yeah, our debt to gross our gross valuation is very small.
Right.
And because of that, we have a high bond rating as well.
Which means that we get really great rates.
We do.
When we go out to bid for on
Right.
bonds.
Yeah.
So, the reason I bring it up is because my expectation is that we are, as a voter, going to be seeing some bonds be offered, be asked us to approve this year. And we're in a really great position to do it because, as you said, things are coming off. And one of the criticisms I've heard over the years is, let's pay off what we already owe before we start taking on more debt. And in fact, we have done that in a lot of cases, and we're almost there on other things. What people have to remember is that the next budget that we vote on is the 2019 budget, not the
Right.
2018 because of the fiscal year.
Right.
And I know many people are aware of that, but other people are not. They think it's a calendar year, not a fiscal year, and so,
Right.
I want us to be as open and speaking about these things for the next few months, just so that people aren't shocked when budget season comes around. People aren't shocked when March comes around and they go to their ballot and they see these things.
Right.
It's something that's needed, but it's not something that's going to cost the town a huge amount, in that we have so much valuation as far as the capital is concerned in our town.
Right. When you look at it's a good time to look at, okay, what are the needs of the community at this point? And you're right, we're in a very good position right now in that there are bonds coming off the books, debt we have been paying that will no longer be there. One of the things we've done with roadway bonds for the future, if you've noticed, we used to bond roadway work. Now what we're doing is every year, it's going into a roadway maintenance fund, and we ask the voters to vote on that. And as roadway bonds start coming off the books, would like to take that money and just add it into the roadway trust fund. So it essentially is a zero-sum game.
Right.
And let's face it, the infrastructure of the roads are very important,
Right.
Especially as the population grows. You can put more cars on the road. I think people appreciate seeing how many roads we're doing every year to maintain them and keep them in good shape. I hear it all the time from vendors that drive all around southern New Hampshire. They come into Londonderry and say, you guys do a great job maintaining your roads. And I think that's a source of pride. And it's also taxpayer dollars well spent. At the end of the day, people want to know, okay, is the money I'm paying in taxes, is it being used as efficiently, as effectively as possible? Is it being well spent? And certainly they can look at our roadways and go, yeah, we're doing a great job in that department. So.
Okay, so there are all those people, though, that are coming down Gilcrest or going up Pillsbury or down Pillsbury, and they're all going across that road 102.
Yep.
That's, in the middle of all of this stuff.
Yep.
And they're saying, wait a minute, that road goes like
Yep.
this.
Yep. So
we're not putting any money into that right now for a very smart reason, right?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So Gilcrest, a portion of Gilcrest, well, actually all of Gilcrest, not all of it, back up, from Pillsbury, Gilcrest down to 102 was done a few years ago because it needed it. We couldn't wait for Woodmont to get started at that point. We know Woodmont's going to be making improvements to their portion of Pillsbury Road in the very near future when they start going into their next phase. So we haven't done that one on purpose because we don't want it ripped up,
right.
a few years later. The intersection at Pillsbury and Gilcrest is going to be addressed. It has to be addressed. We know it's, that three-way stop right now. Pillsbury knows it's going to need to be addressed, so that's why we haven't done anything there. 102 is being resurfaced right now, all the way from Hudson through almost exit 4. The whole thing's being resurfaced. The area right in front of Market Basket, I believe, is going to be held off for now because Woodmont's going to be making improvements to that probably next year. And so the thought is, well, let's not resurface it only to rip it up and have to put more lanes in to accommodate Woodmont. Let's hold off, wait till they get their approval, and that resurfacing is all being done by the state because it's a state road.
Right.
But people can expect that they're going to see in the next few months almost all of 102 is being resurfaced. Obviously, the areas around exit 4 won't be because that's all being worked on right now. But in the end, it's all going to be entirely resurfaced.
And the expectation for exit 4 being complete?
Exit 4 is supposed to be complete in 2019.
Okay.
So it's not that far away.
No, it isn't.
The whole bridge has to be rebuilt. The Ash Street Bridge that has to be rebuilt as well. So there's going to be the next few years in that whole corridor are going to be a little unpleasant.
Right.
But the end product is going to be absolutely beautiful when people see it.
Yeah. So all the more reason we want jobs in town so we don't have to go out
That's
on
right.
102.
Absolutely.
I mean, on 93.
You got that right.
All right. Is there anything else for this session? I mean, we have...
Wow, we really chewed up some time there.
Yeah.
I guess one of the things I was going to get into, but maybe we'll get into the next show because it's, it takes some more time to talk about, but that is we're almost at tax rate setting time. And I love talking about how we set the tax rate because there's a lot of variables involved and people often ask, how does it work? And the thing I always remind people at the deliberative session in February is we're only predicting at that time what the tax rate is going to be, but we don't actually set the rate until October because we don't know the actual numbers of revenue, valuation, and what portions of the budget pass. That is decided after February. And so here's the good news I'll leave you with, and then we can get into it on the next show.
Right.
What we predicted the tax rate to be in February, it's going to be significantly lower than what we predicted it to be. So that's the good news.
So, I've heard for years that the taxes are way too high in Londonderry. And I know, because I know that we are not way too high when you look at the region. When you look at the region, we generally fall in the middle somewhere. And now you're saying we're even moving further down as far as our tax.
Yeah, when you look at, especially this region, I would say we're not even in the middle. We're towards the lower end. If you look at like communities, Bedford, Hudson, Derry, Windham, Salem, Manchester, we are one of the lowest, if not the lowest, in this whole southern New Hampshire region. And you think about how much we have in services here.
Right.
Litchfield, where I lived for 12 years. When I left Litchfield in last year, 2016, Litchfield had a lower tax rate than Londonderry. Today, Londonderry's rate is lower than Litchfield's. Litchfield has hardly any services at all, and they're paying higher taxes than what we're paying in Londonderry. So nobody likes to pay taxes.
Right.
I've never met anyone that says, I think our taxes are too low. Of course, everyone's going to say, that taxes are too high. But when you look at the entire region, we are one of the lowest in the entire
Right.
region, which is a great thing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I
Thank you,
appreciate
Mary.
that. Thank you for being such a great steward of our town. I appreciate that.
Sure.
The beauty of Londonderry is in its citizens. Be informed and let your voice be heard. Come to the different meetings that are being offered, the growth management workshops, and become involved. The more people, the better.
Absolutely.
Thank you.